In this video, I want to discuss the 80-20 rule. And this is just something I came up with. I've asked people a question over the years and typically get an 80-20 answer. And I think this is really going to change. And I think we're at a really transformative moment in human history. And I'll explain why in a couple of details throughout the video. But the question goes like this. Take the totality of your life, the totality of your existence. And what would you guess what percent do you think is influence constructed from your thinking? And what percent do you think is influenced or constructed from external forces like external reality? And what I typically get is an 80-20. So most people, and I think historically this answer would be skewed even more. It might be 90-10 or even 95-5 or something like that, where the vast majority of what we consider our life, what we consider our existence, is influenced by external factors, and a very small percent is constructed from our thoughts. And what I want to consider in this video is, what if that number is reversed? What if 80% of our life, 80% of our existence is actually constructed from our thinking, constructed from our thoughts, and a mere 20% is actually external forces or external reality? Well, again, in some of my videos, I've eliminated that 20% altogether, but let's leave that 20% there. It's good for many reasons. As I said in a recent video about Buddhism, that for the Buddhist, there is an external reality, and it's raining or not, whether or not you think it is. It is as it is. So let's leave that 20% there, but still, 80%, if that's right, how could we have gotten this so wrong? Why do we still get it wrong? Well, first, there's a transparency to thoughts. What I mean by that is thoughts are invisible as thoughts. We assume that they are such good reflections of reality. We never consider that they're just thoughts about reality, representations, mental constructs. And when you consider the vastness of human history going back, millions of years, but then with our version, Homo sapiens, the last 200,000 or 300,000, but then we only started thinking 40 to 70,000 years ago. We started thinking more than any other animal on this planet. But then a whole 70,000 years went by, and it was really only in 1967 where Neisser came up with the definition of cognitive psychology. In other words, there was a collective movement where we began to recognize that our thoughts are not synonymous with reality. In fact, Neisser's definition goes something like this. Cognition, our thoughts, is any process that transforms the sensory data by elaborating, deleting, and editing. And so, that's what we hold in memory. So if I say, well, what did you do yesterday? You're not pulling out like a perfect representation of what happened yesterday, because yesterday, when it happened, you were taking a edited version of reality. That's what your thought about what was going on at the time was. It was an edited version of reality, so it had been, some of it was elaborated, some of it was deleted. And then you stored that transformed version as a memory. And then when I just ask you to recall it, what you were recalling is your transformed version, and then you were again transforming it. So as I tell my students, none of your memories ever happened. Every single memory is a fictional construct that was influenced by interpretation, elaboration, and we're waking up to this. So Neisser came out with this in the 60s. But as a species, cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the most popular. And even with transparency to thoughts, we are beginning to recognize how often we think. And the second thing about thinking that gets us off track is how arrogant thoughts are. It's a system that is always assuming it's right. And so, of course, if it assumes it's right, it's going to kind of assume a dominance in terms of its, how likely it is to accurately represent reality. I mean, that's what being right is all about. But it's not just its arrogance, it's its insistence on being there, It's like that person at a party who just like, the party, it's only happening when I'm here. And so, to keep the party going, we're continuously engaged in thinking. But again, we're not completely awake in terms of how much we're thinking. And so, next time you go for a walk, so this is one of my favorite things, I enjoy walking, but why would you ruin a good walk with thought? You don't need to think to go for a walk. In fact, you don't need to think when you eat. You're perfectly capable of eating, walking, and a long list of other activities without a single thought with for any of it to get accomplished successfully. In fact, for some people, and this happened to Gary Weber, he describes the experience where his thinking just totally shut off. And he even, later on describes it as kind of an interesting experience because, well, there was a kind of a feeling that kind of percolated up like, well, how am I going to get anything done? And he was pleasantly surprised when he was able to accomplish everything that needed to be accomplished with virtually none of the thought that he thought he needed to get the job done. So waking up from this dream of thinking involves recognizing 99% of the thoughts that we have are completely useless. And so why have them? And people who go for a walk without thought immediately recognize the peacefulness that is beyond the thinking mind's concept. And so again, why so much frustration with thinking? Well, consider that your thought process is so convinced that 80% of your reality is determined by external factors, so it's naturally going to look for solutions in the external world. It's going to completely miss the true origin of the problem, which is, of course, thoughts themselves. And so it's very close to a metaphor that Rupert Spira gave recently, and I didn't watch every version of this. So in many of his lectures, he talks about King Lear as a metaphor for how we get so seduced into the thinking mode of existence. And he talks about it as being like an actor. And so maybe there's, John Smith, and he's perfectly happy and content in his life. And this is like us without thinking. And then thoughts come along, so we begin the process of acting, pretending that we are what we are not, which is to say we think. And when an actor takes on a role, it can become very seductive. They absolutely buy into it. And so, of course, this John Smith, who's playing King Lear, once he becomes the actor, he takes on all the problems, and he tries to fix those problems within that fictional world of Shakespeare. And you can see how futile all of that would be. To fix all the problems, you just simply have to wake up to who you actually are, which is not King Lear. And in that same sense, when we wake up that I'm not this thinking, problem solving, mostly problem creating mind that is convinced that it's a perfect reflection of reality. So instead of recognizing that it is the creator of what I call my life,